All right, guys, so you can see my screen, I trust?
Yes.
All right, good. Sometimes I'm getting the hang of this. So, one of the things we're going to talk about today is you're going to hear Gary Keller say a lot, and a lot of us say that your database is your business. And before we get too far along, just give me a sense in your estimation or your definition. What is a database to you? If we're talking about a database, what does that mean to you right now? Anybody? I'm going to try to leave these mics open with the 17 that we've got. I'll try not to mute them. So anybody can jump in on that. What is your database?
It's a source of business.
That's your source of business. Unpack that, Seth. Because that sounds, what does that mean?
Basically, those are people that you've met or have come into your life at some point in your business life or whatever, and you have their information and they're looking for something, whether it's a buy, sell, rent, or referral. Or in the case of some, like if you have agents in the database, they're possible referral partners.
Okay, terrific. What else? Who else has got something that they might add or another spin on what a database is?
Isn't it? It's also people,
What's that?
people in your personal life as well.
People in your personal life as well. And it's interesting because one of the things that sometimes people use the language interchangeably, sphere of influence, right? But I think the sphere of influence is part of your database. But could we agree that not everybody in your database? All right, we're going to have to mute everybody here. So hold on for 1 second. I think I've been practicing over the weekend selective sniper muting. It's an interesting skill set to develop on Zoom. So here's the thing. Your database is all of that, right? Your database is a community. I want you to really think broader than just your CRM, broader than just commit, right? Broader than just a list of names. I want you to think of your database as just this community that your job is to build relationships with in a way of kind of nurturing your business. So here's how we're going to think about this today. We're going to start the way we always start this Ignite 2.0, just reviewing the things that successful agents do every day. We know that success leaves clues, and part of what successful agents do is spend time every day growing their business, generating leads, making seller presentations, listing presentations, buyer presentations, previewing real estate, right? And on the other side of the business, the things that they do to run their business, servicing, listing, showing buyers homes, negotiating contracts, transaction management, all of these things on the right is what agents do in running their business. And what we're going to focus on today is really right here, because your database is largely about lead generation. That's primarily what your database is all about. So with that said, we're going to go through today. What our agenda is we're going to kind of go through what is a database, how do you use a database, how do you develop and nurture that database over time. That's where we're going to go between now and 12 o'clock. The thing that I am going to ask you to remember is if we were doing this in the offices right now, rather than just this 1 hour didactic, we would be having a 3 to 4 hour time together, because part of this Ignite experience is to make sure that you're, practicing your scripts, practicing going through your contracts, practicing, doing live lead generation and all that stuff. I want to make sure that if you really want to get the best experience out of Ignite, that you're doing those things as well, especially in the morning hours, 9:30 to 11. I know we've got power hours where we're making calls and all that sort of stuff, right? It isn't just this 1 hour, although this content is useful. And sidebar, a couple of folks asked me they're going to start Bold Pivot this week, right? Bold Pivot starts tomorrow, I believe. Is that right?
Yes.
The question was, can I do Bold and Ignite together? And under most circumstances, what I would say is probably I wouldn't encourage it. Because under most circumstances, what I will tell you is that Bold can be pretty intense commitment of time. And this way that we've structured Ignite of 3 hours of all the lead generation and practice and all that stuff can be a big commitment of time. And it's just too much time to commit to both. However, Bold Pivot has changed its model, and Ignite, what we're doing right now, is just this informational. So since Bold is on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and Ignite is Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, if you want to just jump into this 1 hour and get this content and then do the activities associated with Bold, I think that's a sort of a hybrid combination that could work really well. So I would say you could actually do it this time around, although most of the time I'd say it probably wouldn't make sense, right? All right, that said, let's get into this. Let's get into the big picture. The one thing I want you to think about in terms of your database is that a well-tended database actually produces leads. That top part here in the sort of the grayed out section, a powerful database is able to, when you work the database properly, it actually produces a predictable flow of leads. And so when I asked what your database is, and Seth said it's a source of business, yeah, it is. We have to think bigger than just our database as being a bucket of contact information. When we nurture our database properly, two important things happen. It becomes our best lead generation source, a better lead generation source than virtually anything else that you can do. And when you do it the right way, it generates leads in a predictable flow and a predictable pattern. And one of the things that my hope is that Ignite helps to create the systems for folks is the ability to kind of create just kind of a constant lead flow so that you can have constant closings. What tends to happen for us is we get on this roller coaster. I've got business, I don't have business. I have business, I don't have business, right? And I got to tell you something, that's not a fun way to live. I get motion sick just at the sight of roller coasters, much less being on one, right? So the predictability of the leads that come out of your database is one of the things we're going to be aiming for. It helps you to nourish the relationships. The size of your database is really going to determine the size of your bank account or the size of your business income. So it is a living record of business relationships. It helps nurture and manage those relationships. It produces a predictable flow of business. And then this last box over here, it improves and the service and strengthens the relationships, right? That's what your database is, all of those things, right? So one of the things I want to ask you before we get too far along is just take a couple minutes with these 4 questions, right? What is the purpose of your database? We started to hint at that just a minute ago. What makes your database valuable? What other industries use databases for prospecting and marketing? And what makes targeted marketing effective? I want you to just take 2 or 3 minutes right now, just by yourself, and just start to sketch out the answers to those questions. We're going to talk about those in a minute here. But before we open it up for comment, I want you to just kind of take 3 or 4 minutes and just kind of answer those for yourself, all right? So I'll keep an eye on the clock and you can do that right now. Anybody want to chime in? We'll start with question number 1. What's the purpose of your database? Anybody want to add any more thoughts to that other than what we've already touched on a little bit already? How about this? What makes your database valuable? Anybody have a thought about that? What makes it valuable?
It's a constant source of income.
It's constant source of income. It could be, Denise. That's what we're aiming for, right? Yeah. You know, when you think about a doctor or a dentist, my dentist just retired last year. And, you know, we've had this dentist since probably the 1970s, to be honest with you. And, you know, what happens is when he retired, what did he do? He sold his practice. Right? He sold his practice. And you see doctors do that. You see attorneys do that. Sometimes accountants do that. And what happens is that practice, that database, that list of patients, right, has a value. I don't know what the dentist paid for it, who bought it, but I can tell you something. This was a well-established dentist who was well-known in the state, was a professor at UMDNJ, had a big following. That practice was worth money, right? What would it be like if our real estate database was nurtured in that way, that we had that kind of community that at the end of our careers, we could either sell it as a practice or we could step out of it and hire somebody to run it and still have that enterprise generating revenues and we take some income stream on it. You know, the value of what this database can become when nourished properly I don't know that agents always think the same way that doctors do, but I'd love for you to think entrepreneurially that way. Because what we tend to do is we tend to think of these two transactionally. You know, I've got a business transaction, we're going to do a deal, and then the deal's done, and maybe somewhere down the line I'll get another transaction, but I want you to think broader than that, right? What other industries use a database for prospecting and marketing? Any other industries that you're aware of?
Well, my chiropractor sends me an email every few days.
And what does that email say? I'm curious this time. Does it say, sorry, you can't come into the office, I bet your back hurts? Because that's what my wife's chiropractor should be sending.
Well, I haven't been going anywhere, but she was taking patients, and then my neck hurt, and I thought, huh? Here she is. She came top of mind to me because she was sending me emails all the time. I mean, I didn't read them, but I knew who they were from, and there she was in my email. So it works.
So doctors and healthcare institutions are using databases for staying in touch. What others? Are you on anybody else's database?
Financial.
Tons of them, right?
I'd say political organizations are very aggressive.
Political organizations are very, very, very good at this. Very good at this, right? And so the idea, why do you think they spend so much time and energy into doing that?
It must work.
Well, because one of the things that happens is if they can try to get their message out in front of the people that are more inclined to want to hear it, there's a better chance of that message being heard, right? And so one of the things that we start to think about building a database is how do we build a database around the permission to communicate? We're going to talk about that a little bit. You know, what you're going to find is, generally speaking, you don't get political messages from folks who are of a different party persuasion. Now, you know, I'm actually an independent voter. I don't belong to any political parties, and so I don't seem to get any things from anybody practically. But I do know lots of different folks. And what happens is when you subscribe to a newsletter, when you fill out a form on a consumer website, and you start to be kind of flagged as somebody that has interest in a certain area, right? And then those databases are used and they're tagged and they're flagged and messages are sent out which they believe are consistent to something that you're gonna resonate with. And that's what we call target marketing, right? What makes target marketing effective, right? Anybody have some thoughts about that? What makes that target marketing so effective?
Well, anything that, Hal,
Hey, Paul.
hey, what's happening? Anything that involves a product or a service, you have to identify that particular customer that will expedite the whole sales process. In other words, what other competing products are they using? What are their ordering patterns? And that's all. You could purchase that, or you could do it on your own. Just farming your neighborhood.
Yep.
New real estate. That's a form of database creation.
It's a form of database management, for sure it is, right? And so what a database allows you to do is it allows you to kind of organize your contacts and organize folks in such a way that you can target your communications to them in such a way that they're more likely to resonate, right? And we'll talk about how to do that in a little bit with things like tags and whatnot. But that's overall what a database is all about, right? Now, there's a couple levels to a great database. We're going to break it down into the essential, the effective, and the exceptional. To have an essential database, what do you think has to be at minimum in order for somebody to be in your database? What kinds of information would be essential, do you think?
Phone number, email.
Phone number, email. Okay, what else?
The name of the person.
What's that?
The name of the person, too.
The name of the person, right? Just having a whole bunch of telephone numbers or emails in your database is going to help you if you don't know what to call them when you reach them, right? So when you think about an essential database, what you need is basically these four things. You need to at least have a name, you know who you're talking to. You need to have some kind of contact information, right? You need to have past business and past contract records to the extent you can, right? If it was a past customer, some elements of what transactions they were involved in. If they weren't a past customer, but how do you know them? What's the context, right? And then you have to have the ability for what we call at-will communication. Now, what do you think, what does at-will communication mean to you?
I mean that they're allowing you to contact them.
Right. At-will communication means A, you've got valid contact information, and B, It's not quite permission yet, right? It's not that they've expressly said, Cynthia, feel free to send me your stuff.
Mhm.
It's just that you have valid way to reach them, and you send stuff to them, and they don't immediately reject it. They don't unsubscribe. They don't call you up and say, hey, stop sending me your stuff, right? It's really the lowest level of entry is the ability to communicate with somebody without annoying them, right? That's kind of what we're talking about with at will communication. And the very, very basics for essential databases is you got to have the name, the contact information, the past records to the extent you can, and establish at least the capacity for at-will communication where you can send them things at your will and they're not going to reject it. Now, the next level, to make that more effective, what do you think would be the next level up? What would you want to have to make it more effective?
How about birthdays, anniversaries?
Okay.
Constant communication.
Well, constant communication is what we're going to do. At this stage of the game, what we're talking about is what kinds of information would you want to gather, right? And what kinds of permissions. So here's where we're going to go. Effective databases are ones that are not only at will communication, but they've obtained permission to stay engaged. Where people actually are saying to you, you know what, Martha, I want what you're going to send me. I'm interested in what you have, right? Because what we know is there are fewer people that will give you that kind of permission. However, the people that give you permission will be more receptive to your message and more likely to work with you, right? So an effective database is one where we've actually created enough value that we've gotten permission to stay engaged, right? We collect personal information like the birthdays and the names and the contact information and the names of their puppy and all these different things, right? Insights, preferences, things that are important to them. And then we segment and we group them together based on these first 6, right? We start to think about how do we organize these, right? How do we group these together in ways that are meaningful, right? And so we're gonna, talk about the importance of kind of putting people together into groups. And you may have a group of people that perhaps are all people that you know from a certain organization. You may have groups of people that are all looking to buy. You may have groups of people that are all looking to sell. You may have groups of people who are all whatever. However it makes sense for your business to organize those. But an effective database doesn't just have all the names thrown into a filing cabinet without putting them in some sort of file for organizational purposes, right? And so an effective database has the ability to do that segmenting. And number 8 here, purposeful and consistent communication. Purposeful communication that is based on the information and the insights and the preferences, purposeful in that it's consistent, purposeful in that it's done with a structured intent, and it's in multiple different formats, right? That's what makes a database even more effective, right, is numbers 5 through number 8. And then to really, really get an exceptional database, what we want to have is the capacity to do some automation, right? To do some automation. I'm here to tell you that you can never automate your database entirely, nor should you want to. Your database is a community of people, and you can never automate a real human relationship, nor should you ever want to. But what does automation, if you bring automation into your database, what does it allow you to do? Well, it allows you to do things more efficiently. It allows you to keep track of the tasks as to when is it time to call, when is it time to email, what information should I be sending. And as much as you can do from an automation standpoint to organize your activity and schedule your activity for you, as opposed to leaving it up to you every morning to say, gee, who should I call today? The more effective and efficient your database runs, right? So there's 3 levels to a great database. You need to have the essential for sure. Got to have name, contact information, at-will communication. More effective, we're going to try to obtain permission and create enough value that people want to stay engaged and collect personal information. In this column number 2, to the extent you can, I would even encourage you to try to get some information or assessment on your own in terms of people's behavioral styles. Now, what do I mean by behavioral styles? Anybody familiar with the DISC behavior style type indicator? Anybody familiar?
Yep.
And so what is DISC? Who was that saying yes? So was that you? Who was that?
That was me, Seth.
So talk to me about DISC. What is DISC?
It's a personality profile. Has different types of personalities, some of very like high, like the high D was basically, I think that's like the decision maker, like now we need the decision now, quick, doesn't want the information. I I think needs the information. And then there's S or C, and I forget which one it is more emotional, and needs more of the finessing and to be on their side type of thing.
Well, here's what it comes down to, Seth, and you've got the gist of it, right? Human beings kind of fall into 4 different behavioral styles. And what happens is, when you were in kindergarten, you learned the golden rule. The golden rule was do unto others as you would have them do unto you, right? Treat people the way you want to be treated. Well, what the platinum rule does is it takes that one step further. It tries to say, don't treat everybody the way that I would want to be treated, because you may want to be treated differently than me. How do I communicate with you in a style that's more consistent with what you want? And so I found this question I thought I'd share with you. It's on my Kindle here. It's from the book, The 7 Levels of Communication, right? If you haven't read The 7 Levels of Communication, it's a great book. Here's the magic disc question, okay? Here's how this question goes. How would your best friend describe you? 1, straight and to the point. 2, social and outgoing. C, steady and dependable. Or 4, cautious and perfectly accurate. Are you quick and to the point, social and outgoing, steady and dependable, and cautious and perfectionistic? Because that aligns really, really well with the 4 behavioral styles. Straight and to the point is the D. It's the driver. It's the just get to the point, don't waste my time, right? It's focused, it's driven, it's impulsive. Not necessarily in a bad way. Some of the most successful people are high Ds, right? I is social and outgoing, right? That interpersonal, that person who kind of likes to be the life of the party, that person who is always kind of wants to be the center of attention, right? S, the steady, consistent, probably 2/3 of the population leads with S. Steady, consistent, dependable. They like things to be predictable. They don't like things to be chaotic. C is that detail-oriented person, the person who is doesn't like to make a mistake. It's ready, aim, fire, right? And all of us falls into one of these 4 camps. And here's the kind of the rule of thumb is when if you have a sense of what kind of profile you're talking to, it's going to shape the way you communicate. Someone who is a high D, who's get to the point, is not going to really need a whole lot of fluff in this conversation. They're not going to be warmed up with, tell me what's going on in your world, right? Some of the high Ds on our call right now are tuning out going, dude, can you tell me something that's relevant to my business? The high S's are going to be they need to kind of tell me something good, right? So here's an adage that they have in the 7 Levels of Communication. I love this. It says, care like everyone is an S. Smile to everyone as if they're an I. Prepare for every interaction as though everyone is a high C. And sell like everyone is a high D. When you know what style you have and you have a quick little notation in your database, it's going to shape the way that you communicate with them. And it's going to make that communication more powerful. One of the things that Command does not have a place for is for a DISC assessment. And I put that in as a request, an upgrade. I don't know that's their highest upgrade. For right now, would just put that on the note page at the landing page when you put a client in. Just get a sense of what you think they are, right? D, I, S, and C. It's going to shape the way you communicate. Mm-hmm. All right. Any questions about any of this before we move on? I want to make sure that we're answering all your questions before we move on to the next area. Mm-hmm. We're all good about DISC. There's lots of ways you can learn more about DISC. We'll do some DISC classes. There's some scheduled for later on this month, I believe. But there's a lot more you can learn about behavioral profile in business as well, right? So why use a database? Well, here's the thing. 2 key elements to a database. It's going to help you avoid what we call the today trap, and it's going to give you the ability to have a predictable rate of return or return on investment. So let's start with this. Let's talk about the today trap. What's the today trap? Well, here's the thing. In your database or in the world, there's 2 types of business. Business that can be done today and business that's going to be done in the future. And unless you're working with a database, the only thing you're focusing on is today business only, right? You're only focusing on today's opportunity, that opportunity that's in front of you right now. And it's interesting because the National Association of Realtors says that the average American moves approximately every 10 years, right? And so if we're only focusing on people that are today business, if we're only focusing on people who are going to take action this year, then 90% of our database we're not attending to. 90% of the opportunity we won't be in front of when the time comes, right? And so I want you to think about it this way. If there's 100 people in your database, right? There's 100 people. And if out of the 100 people, let's assume that 65 people right now are gonna want to be homeowners and 35% will stay renters. And that's about the breakdown in the United States of homeownership. About 65% of Americans are homeowners, about 35 will be renters. So if we took that 65, and these are the people that would have an interest in owning a home over the course of their lifetime. And then we looked at that 65 and we said 10% of those people are gonna be this year. That's 6.5 people. Now, it's really hard to do business with a half a person. So I like to round that up. Unless you're dealing with like a pregnant person, a pregnant woman who's like 1.5, I'm just gonna round that up. So if we rounded 6.5 up, what we would have is 7 people in your database that would be now business. Based on the numbers, now business of people who are looking to buy or sell this year. Do you see what a tiny little piece of your database is? And if all we're doing is focusing on that, if all we're doing is focusing on the now business, what it means is we constantly have to be in what some trainers call hunting mode. I don't love the imagery of hunting as a metaphor for prospecting, because to me that implies too much of being threatening and people trying to run away from you, right? But I think one of the things that happens is if all we're doing is focusing on now business and not cultivating future business, we do constantly have to be out there strapping it on and going after the hardest to catch every single time. Mm-hmm. I had an agent who used to work for me years ago in Montclair, and she was a skilled hunter. She was relentless as a hunter and a great prospector. And she was always Circle of Excellence, silver, gold every year. She was never platinum, but she was a solid agent. But it was only focusing on now business. Everything that she did was lead generation for the now. There was no interest in building a database and nurturing it over time. And it just was so much energy spent, just so much energy spent all the time, as opposed to if you focus on your entire database and you're not only developing today's business, but you're in the pathway of tomorrow's business, staying top of mind, just like Marianne's chiropractor is, that when the time comes that you think about it, you're top of mind, it just makes it that much easier, right? So the first thing that using a database well does is it helps you to stay not just focused on today's business, but also tomorrow's business as well, right? How about return on investment? Well, here's what I'll tell you. This is what the research would show. And we study this at Keller Williams International. What we know is that for every dollar that you invest in working your database, you should expect to return anywhere between $10 to $14 in revenue on the back end. Every dollar invested should yield $10 to $14 in return. Would anybody be happy with a 10 to 14% return on their investment with a stock investment these days?
Yeah.
I think a lot of us would, right? And I'll tell you the truth that there's a lot of agents who find that the return on their investment is higher than 10 to 1 or 14 to 1. There's a lot of agents that I talk to right now who track their numbers, and they'll tell you that their return on investment is upwards of 30 to 40 to 1. For every dollar invested, there's $40 in return. Well, that only happens if you maintain top of mind standing with folks, right? So it's possible to get much more. That to get to that 30 to 1 to that 40 to 1 isn't just the people in your database using you, it's them choosing to refer you as well, right? And on Thursday at 1 o'clock, I'm going to do a class on how to build an advocate-based database. When your database not only uses you when they need to, but they go out and they become your ambassadors. They go out there and they talk you up. That's how you get massive return, right, on your investment, right? So 2 important reasons to use this database. One is it helps you focus not just on today, but into the future, and it gives you great rate of return. The other thing we'll think about is database generated leads are three really important considerations. One, they tend to be the lowest cost per lead. If you start to track your expenditures, and I know that we've had some sessions recently on how to use like Facebook marketing and social media marketing and using the expanded KW account to generate really low cost leads. And some of us are doing that. And while that's true, and you can generate leads for pennies in some instances, what I'm here to tell you is that leads that come out of your database routinely are the lowest cost of all, right? They're the lowest conversion cost. They're easier to convert because they've got the social proof that comes. And when you work this database consistently, the money spent on it not only pays for itself, but pays for itself over and over again. So database, lowest cost leads, lowest conversion cost, pays for itself. So how do we do it? I think we've made a case that working your database is important, right? How do we do it? Well, here's what we're going to focus on. There's two ways right now. There's two ways to, well, actually, even before we get into the ways to feed your database, there's four kind of levels here that database management requires. First is you constantly have to be feeding your database. You constantly have to be getting people to it, right? It's feed it consistently, segment it into the right groups, engage it properly with the right touch campaigns, purposefully, and then tend to the database over time. So let's start with feeding it. The way you feed your database is through lead generation, right? And there's two things we can do for lead generation. There's prospecting and there's marketing. And if we look at this triangle, what we see is that marketing is the top of the pyramid and prospecting is the base of the pyramid. Our lead generation efforts should be prospecting based, but enhanced by the marketing. Right, the marketing can be a little bit more money intensive.
She keeps open the window or something. You have to realize every time the internet went, it's because of her.
I'm gonna mute you all there for a second. Whoever's got that going, I'm gonna ask you to mute yourself. Okay. All right. So prospecting based, marketing enhanced. Prospecting is time intensive. It's proactive. There's immediate results, but there's only two ways to get names into your database. Either you prospect for them or you market for them. Now, once you get people in your database, the next thing we've got to do is we've got to segment it. We've got to organize it. And the way that we do that in CRMs in general, but specifically in Command, is we do it through a process that we call tags. And sometimes we do it in a process that we call grouping. I will tell you that there's two inherent groups that exist in Command when you start out. And the groups basically are leads and contacts. And the definition of these groups, a lead would be that person that we've got the essentials for their database communication. We know who they are. We've got a reliable way to reach them. And we're just having one-way communication. We don't have a permission-based relationship yet. When they've engaged back with us and we have permission to take that relationship to the next level, they move from lead to contact. And so inherently, we've got two broad groups in Command, leads and contacts. But then inside, this is where you want to start thinking about how are you going to organize the file folders inside of your filing cabinet in a way that makes sense for your business. And you might do that with tags related to the business relationship. Maybe you've got people that are tagged as active clients. Maybe you've got people that are tagged as past clients. Maybe you've got people who are tagged as somebody who's been referred, has referred business to you, right? Or somebody who is an advocate and refers a lot of business to you. You may have tags for people that share the same kinds of hobbies. You may have tags for parents with small children. You may have tags with people that you know from different organizations, people that are vendors. There's a million different ways that you can organize the file folders inside your filing cabinet in a way that makes sense for your business, right? Can anybody give me any examples? And I've got you all muted for a second here. I'm going to unmute you again. Can anybody give me some examples of tags that they're using in their business that are just a good way for your business to organize the people that you've got inside? Who's got some tags?
My referral partners, I've tagged them as either agents or sometimes even from my my college alma mater. If I met them at alumni events, they have different tags.
Okay.
And I got them tagged buyers and sellers.
Yep. Anybody else have some different tags that they like?
Multifamily investor.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I have A list, B list, C list. I have talent for people that might be going into real estate, and then I have aligned resources.
Talk to me about A list, B list, C list. What does that mean in your coding?
A list are just the people that I really want to be building close relationships with, reaching out to, making sure that I'm calling them on their birthday, their anniversaries. B list, they're not quite there yet.
Okay.
But they're people that, I wouldn't mind building those relationships with. And then C list are people that, I met at an open house who I've called a few times, but they've never reached back to me. But they still get automatic emails and other things that I send out.
And the beauty of tagging is it allows you to group people in a way that makes sense for you to organize your interactions, right? I used to like to tag my buyers and sellers with a coding system that was a little A, B, and C, but to me, it was really more reflected to how quickly did I think they were going to make a transaction happen? How quickly were they going to list, or how quickly were they going to buy? And an A may be somebody who would be within 30 days. A B would be maybe 31 days to, maybe 90 days. A C would be 90 days out, whatever it was. It doesn't matter how you organize it, as long as it's an organizational system that makes sense to you. Right? A lot of times we have basic generic kinds of tags, these buyer tags, seller tags, investor tags, multi-home investor tags, whatever way. There's a lot of generics, but you're going to find the uniqueness of your own database. As you start looking at the people that you put in, you're going to start seeing patterns emerge. For example, Seth mentioned people from your college alma mater, and I know that there was a time, Seth, in your business when that was a focus of your lead generation, correct?
Yeah.
And so you tag all those people together because when the time comes that you're going to address that group, you want to be able to pull all of those together, right?
Yeah.
So the idea here is, and I'm not going to do the demo portion in the interest of time, is to start to make these custom tags. What makes a database really effective is that you've got people in, you've got them organized in a way that they're in groups that make sense so that you can do the next step, which is to stay in touch using a variety of smart plans that make sense for the group that they're in. Now, if we were going to do the tech demo here, I would show you that we could go in and we could be doing these custom tags and we could be making them colors and all these different things like that. And I think that sometimes it's nice to have in your database different colors for different tags because it gives you some good visual cues as to who's who. But once you've got people put in your database, no one should go in your database without being assigned into a group through a tagging system. If you've got a rogue name in there that isn't tagged, what will happen is that that person won't be in the right bucket for follow-up. And the whole nature of what makes a database work and what makes a database a lead generation machine is how do we follow up, right? How do we stay engaged? And we do that through smart plans. Right? And so there's two different buckets that we said, two different groups that we said at the very beginning of your business in Command. You're going to have two broad groups. It's the lead group and the contacts group. The difference is the leads, as you see here, one-way communication. You've got at-will communication, but not yet permission-based communication. Contacts is generated by permission to stay engaged. And so the way that we engage these on the smart plans and the touch campaigns is 19 to connect for the leads, and the touch campaign for the contacts is the 36 touch to convert. And what we know is that if I'm in touch with you 19 times a year, even though you're not communicating back to me over the course of time, as long as you haven't unsubscribed, I'm going to be in front of you when the need comes. If you remember the very, very first session of Ignite, if you were with us, we talked about the fact that there's this oscillating curve of people that need to buy real estate. At the top of the curve is when they have the greatest need, and then they buy or sell real estate and they go to the bottom of the curve, and now they don't have any need, and then they work their way back up to the next need, and it just goes back and forth. By staying in touch over time, we're constantly with them at all parts of that journey, so that we're in front of them at the time that they need us, even though that little stick figure of 100 people that we showed you before as your entire database, only 7 of them are probably going to need to buy or sell real estate this year. The other 93 will be in front of when the time comes. So how do we get to 19 touches? People say to me all the time, well, 19 touches, how would I do it? Well, one thing that you would do is you would start by building it out with a 12 touch a monthly email, a monthly newsletter, a monthly market report, a monthly video. And there are already some stock off the shelf campaigns, action plans inside of Command that will allow you to put people on for a once a month touch. Probably the monthly neighborhood nurture is the most common one, where it sends real estate information specific to their area. And what I would say is if you're not familiar with action plans, if you're not familiar with how to do this, at 1 o'clock today, Chris Garefa is going to do a class on action plans. Jump on it, right? Jump on that 1 o'clock class if you're not familiar with this. But the 19 to connect rather, is based 12 touches is going to be a monthly nurture. And then you're going to put them on a quarterly telephone call, which means every 3 months, your automated CRM is going to tell you, okay, Martha, now it's your time to call Robert. And you're going to pick up the phone and you're going to call him. And he's maybe not going to pick up the phone because if you haven't really connected yet, you're probably going to get his answering machine. And you're just going to leave a message that says, hey, Rob, it's Martha. Just reaching out to you again. Just letting you know I'm here. If there's anything I can do, here's how you can reach me. Boom, boom, boom. 3 months later, you do the same thing. It's just 4 times a year they hear your voice. 2 times a year, promotional mail of some sort. And 1 time a year, you're going to invite them to an event, right? And this is not a client appreciation event because they're not clients yet. It's probably typically going to be like a coat driver, a canned goods driver, something like that. Mm-hmm. The 36 touch campaign happens when you convert them. Once they've engaged you and you have two-way communication, now this is going to be a bi-monthly touch campaign. Then twice a month neighborhood nurture is a really good way to do that. Again, 4 telephone calls, 2 touches, 2 events and parties and things like that, and then maybe 4 promotional events of some kind, promotional mail of some kind. Mm-hmm. But if you've got these touch campaigns layered in and built in and assigned to the right buckets, what's going to happen is you're going to have the level of relationship that makes sense. What will happen sometimes is where you'll have people unsubscribe is if you're burying them too much and they don't want what you have. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I'll tell you is if somebody unsubscribes from your bi-monthly newsletter, it doesn't mean take me out of your database. Typically what it means is this thing that you're sending me 2 times a month is too much. Maybe 1 time a month would be better. Before you take them out of the database entirely, get in touch and start to see what would be a more reasonable play. I will tell you that a lot of folks who have big databases, a lot of the big mega teams around the country who are doing huge lead generation through sources like internet lead generation and Facebook lead generation, and they're getting hundreds and hundreds of leads a week. Many of those folks have a short-term intensive plan to try to convert them. And if they can't convert them in a period of months, typically, they just move them down to maybe even just a quarterly touch. 4 times a year, you're going to hear from me, but you're not going to be entirely out of my database, right? But these are the 2 different models that we advocate for. 19 touches to connect, 36 touches to convert. And those are the models that we're going to ask you to, once you've got people assigned into the right buckets, to put these on a combination of action plans or smart plans that leads to this combination. This is where we find it's the most efficient to convert. Now, if you only had 34 touches, is it going to not be effective? Of course not. If you only had 31 touches, is it going to be not effective? Of course not. 36 is not a magic number. It's just that's roughly the volume of kind of 3 times a month is the volume that we find is where things become predictable, right, in their lead flow. Any questions about these 2 campaign models, the 19 to connect, 36 to convert? Or how you might stack your action plans or your smart plans to get to those numbers?
So Hal, when you have the 19 to connect and 36 to convert, if they're a lead and then they become a contact that go on the 36,
yep.
So they start out in the 19.
Everybody starts out on a 19 until you've got 2-way permission. So for example, if I was somebody that was introduced to you by one of your college buddies, I'm a lead at that point. I get on a 19 to convert. If at some point then I pick up the phone and say, hey, Seth, you know what? Let's talk a little bit more about this because I'm thinking about buying a house this year. Now I've moved over into the contact. Now I'm on a 36. And it can go the other way. it can go the other way. I think we touched on that last week. Sometimes you've got somebody and you believe that you've got two-way communication going, and all of a sudden they ghost you. That happens, right? And so sometimes before you automatically downshift them back into lead status, just find out what's going on. Frequently, the reason why people disappear and why they ghost you is they're just at the precipice of making that final decision. And the emotional things that are swirling around inside of them have got them a little bit overwhelmed. And so they just kind of put their head in the sand for a little bit. Don't immediately put them into the lead category and downshift. Find out for sure what's going on first. But people can go back and forth between both categories, right?
Okay.
So we put people in the database, we segment it, we engage with it. Then we've got to nurture our database and sort of tend to it over time. And when we say tend to it, the same way a gardener tends to the flowers and trees and prunes the bushes and things like that, you constantly want to be working your database. Now, when I say pruning your database, rarely do I mean to remove someone. I'm not typically a big fan of cutting people out of your database unless they ask you to. If I get a message from Eric today and he says, you know what, I'm sick to death of your stuff, you're annoying the hell out of me. If you don't take me out of your database and stop sending me stuff, I'm going to call the police or I'm going to come over to your house. At that point, you're coming out of my database. I'm not in the business to make you crazy. But absent somebody specifically requesting to come out, I'm going to continue to keep you in the database. I just may change the intensity with which I follow up, but I do want to stay in front of you to the level that you're willing to tolerate it. When we're talking about tending your database, though, we're talking about a couple things. One is building a culture around testimonials and reviews. If I can get this database to not only use me, but to refer me and become an advocate-based database, which is the topic on Thursday's class. Well, one of the things that's going to really help in your business kind of exploding from your database is if you can build a culture in your database of having people write testimonials for you and write reviews for you. And so one of the questions I'm going to ask you is, how are you going to ensure that that happens? How are you going to make sure that the people in your database are going to write testimonials for you? Is there any systems in place or tasks that you could schedule or processes that you would follow to make sure that that happens?
You just keep asking at different points of the transaction. So like if, you know, when you go into contract, some people, I think there's people that say you ask right off the bat. You know,
right out of the very gate, very first day, hey, Seth, it's nice to meet you. Would you give me a referral?
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of thoughts around that. I personally don't subscribe to that.
I don't either.
Personally, to me, here's what I think. Testimonials and reviews and referrals, these are things that you have to earn the right to. And I don't believe in the very beginning you've earned the right to anything yet. You've earned the right, hopefully, to stay engaged in a way to prove yourself, but you're not entitled to anything until you've proven yourself. Right? But I think one of the things that we want is testimonials. Will people become advocates for us? Will they speak up on our behalf? And we don't always just have to limit that to the people that have been our past real estate customers. There's plenty of people who can speak to your integrity and to your work ethic and to all the things that are important in a relationship with a professional person, even though they may not have interacted with you in a real estate transaction. There's nothing that stops somebody from writing a testimonial on your behalf, speaking about your character. And in the very beginning, that's kind of what you have, right? Until you've got transactional volume, that's what's most important. That's what you have. And so one of the things I just encourage you to do is to build a culture of getting these testimonials and reviews in the transaction, as Seth was mentioning before. My personal feeling is there's a right time and a wrong time. Generally speaking, I don't like to ask for referrals and or testimonials at times when there's a lot of stress in the transaction. Gee, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, sorry that home inspection didn't work out for you and you have to put a new roof on the house. But by the way, who do you know that I can represent? How about this? Bite me, agent, right? That's not exactly the right time, right? So you really want to ask for these at times when there's a relative calm in the transaction. I also think what you want to try to do is to leverage the law of reciprocity. We know what the law of reciprocity is, right? Who can explain that real quick? What does the law of reciprocity state?
Well, if I help you, you'll help me.
Right. When I do something good for you, you're going to want to do something good back for me. It's as simple as if I go up to you in a party and introduce myself. Hi, my name is Hal. What's your name? Your inclination is to extend your hand back out, although we can't do that now with social distancing, and say, my name is Marianne because I gave you mine first. Anytime that you do something for someone else, human nature is to try to settle the score and even the slate. And so periodically what I think is there's certain times in the course of a transaction when it is smart to do unexpected little surprise things to make your clients happy. It's good business. It's good business to do those little surprise things. And it's an opportunity then when they acknowledge that for them to do something back for you. And so, you know, we talk about that in terms of what kinds of things could you do, you know, and we've given examples of things like at the home inspection. I've known of agents who, after the home inspection walkthrough is done, as the clients run off to the closing, they bring their cleaning crew to come in, and they've got a team of 4 or 5 people who scrub down that house and spend 2 or 3 hours getting everything sparkly. So when the closing is over, people come back into a freshly cleaned house. And that kind of thing is just a nice touch. It's unexpected. And it's just something that people are like, wow, that's really cool. I can't believe you did that. That's the moment when they acknowledge you for that, for you to say, hey, I'm so glad you appreciated that and it meant something to you. You know, who do you know? Who else do you know that I could provide that kind of service for? That's the kind of time to do it, right? But build a culture around testimonials and reviews, and that culture is not only making sure that we ask for them, but you decide where you want to put those reviews, right? What I believe right now is, in my personal estimation, and there's different schools of thought on this, increasingly though, when I talk to some of the agents who are doing this at a really high level, they've chosen to make Google the place where they park most of their business reviews. They register their business on Google. And if you haven't learned how to register your business on Google so that when somebody searches your name, you get not only that search result on Google, but you get that business page profile, that business panel on the right side of the screen. You can learn how to do that on YouTube. I think one of the tech people in our market centers did a class on that last week. It might have been Chris. And it's probably, that instruction probably lives on our BCP page. But that's the place where a lot of people are putting reviews. Why? Because when they search your name, that's the first place that you're going to see, and they don't have to go somewhere else. And I just think that increasingly Google and Amazon and Apple kind of own the world. And so if they're going to own the flow of information, it pays to kind of play inside their ecosystem. You could put reviews on Zillow. You could put reviews on Facebook. You could put reviews other places. But I'm finding that people are sensing that Google is the best place right now. So to tend to your database, build a culture around testimonials and reviews, and then regularly update your database. Update it with new information. As you engage people and you get new information, we've got to make sure that updated information gets in. Hey, I have a new phone number. Hey, we just adopted a puppy and his name is Sparky. Who knows what? All that stuff goes in, right? And we, as people, get into different groups. Hey, you know what? I have a group, believe it or not, of people in my database that are all barbecue aficionados. I'm a big barbecue fan. And if suddenly one of you guys decided that you wanted to learn about Texas barbecue, you might end up in my barbecue group. It's as things change, are people in the right groups? Do I have the right information? Am I following up with them in the right way? So the takeaway on this last part of pruning, it's not so much pruning as cutting and getting rid of. It's pruning in terms of making sure that A, we're getting testimonials so that the database can continue to fuel our business, and B, that we're updating with the best information. All right. Now, we're going to wrap up. I'm looking at the time. I got 11:58. Give me any ahas, any takeaways from today. Has your thinking changed? How has you feel differently? Any actions you'll take? This is the aha to achievement phase of what we talked about in the past hour. Who's got something that they can share?
Hal, it's a cliche, but how does it go? It's not a race. It's a marathon.
Marathon.
And 19 to 36. I mean, if you build this according to the formula and you're just starting out, I can't see how you're not going to come into evolving this into a really solid 36. It may take a little while, but you just have to just
You
persist and do it. Just do it.
You just gotta, and the beauty, Paul, one of the things that is really, really important that you're hitting on is it's just about following the models. We know how to do this. We know what models work.